3 weeks ago, the Indiana Fever's president made a decision behind closed doors that nobody saw coming. Not the fans, not the media, not even the players. And when it leaked, the entire WNBA stopped. Because this wasn't just a front office move. This was a statement, a line drawn in the sand. And depending on which side you're on, it either saves Caitlin Clark's future in Indiana or ends it. Let's set the scene. It's 2025. The Indiana Fever are no longer a punchline. They are the most watched, most talked about franchise in women's professional basketball on the planet. Sellouts every night. National TV deals. Merchandise flying off shelves. A waiting list for season tickets that stretches into the hundreds. All of it. Every single seat, every camera, every dollar, built on the foundation of one player, Caitlin Clark. And the Fever front office knows it. They've always known it. But here's the thing about organizations that get saved by a miracle. Sometimes they forget who the miracle was. Let me take you back to where this really started. Before April 2024, the Indiana Fever were one of the most forgettable franchises in professional sports. Not just in the WNBA, in all of professional sports. 8 straight losing seasons after Tamika Catchings retired. A 2012 championship that felt like ancient history. Home games at Gainbridge Fieldhouse where the echoes were louder than the crowds. You have to understand what that building felt like in 2022 and 2023. Rows of empty seats. Piped-in music filling the silence. Players grinding through a season that nobody was watching. These were professional athletes, talented, dedicated women, performing in near total obscurity. The Fever had become invisible, and then the 2024 draft lottery handed them the #1 pick. Now, when a struggling franchise wins a lottery, the usual story goes like this. They draft a promising prospect. The rebuild takes 2 or 3 years. The city slowly buys back in, and somewhere down the road there's a playoff run. That's the normal arc. Caitlin Clark didn't give Indiana a normal arc. She gave them a detonation. Her first preseason game, drew 13,000 fans. Her regular season home opener sold out before most people even knew tickets were available. Road games became road invasions. Fever fans flooding into arenas across the country. Washington moved the game to the Wizards' NBA arena just to handle the demand. Television ratings for WNBA games hit numbers the league hadn't seen in a generation. Some broadcasts crossed 2.5 million viewers. Figures that sent ESPN executives scrambling to renegotiate conversations they thought were already settled. And it wasn't slowing down. It was accelerating. So by the time the 2025 season approached, the Indiana Fever weren't just a franchise in recovery. They were a cultural phenomenon. And the woman running the front office, Fever President Kelly Krauskopf, was sitting on top of something she had never seen before in 30 years of working in women's basketball. She had the most valuable asset in the sport, maybe one of the most valuable individual athletes in all of American professional sports right now. And she had a choice to make, a very specific, very consequential choice, one that would define the franchise for the next decade. Here's where it gets complicated, because Caitlin Clark's rookie contract was always going to be a problem. Not because Clark wasn't worth the money. She was worth every dollar, and then some. The problem was the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement, which locked rookie salaries at numbers that felt almost embarrassing compared to what Clark was generating for the league. We're talking about a player driving hundreds of millions in revenue, media value, and brand partnerships, playing on a contract that paid her less than most mid-level NBA backup players make in a single week. The whole league was watching to see how Indiana would handle it. Would they find creative ways to invest in Clark's happiness and long-term commitment to franchise? Or would they lean on the contract, take what they were getting, and hope the situation didn't become a distraction? And then, without warning, the Fever's president made her move. Not a press conference, not a leaked memo, not a carefully worded statement to ESPN. A decision, quiet, deliberate. And when word got out, it set off a firestorm that tore straight through the WNBA fan base and landed on every major sports network in the country. Some fans called it visionary. Some called it betrayal. Some called it the smartest thing any women's basketball executive had done in 20 years. But nobody called it boring, because this decision didn't just affect Caitlin Clark. It sent a message to every player in the league. And that message, you're either going to love it or it's going to make your blood boil. You want to know what the decision was. But before I tell you, you need to understand the pressure cooker that forced it. Because this didn't happen in a vacuum. This happened because of a war. A quiet, simmering, increasingly public war between what Caitlin Clark deserves and what the Indiana Fever were actually delivering. And once you see the full picture, the president's decision hits completely differently. Let's talk about the summer of 2024. Because while Clark was busy breaking every rookie record in WNBA history, most points, most assists, most three-pointers, highest-rated broadcast numbers the league had seen since the days of Lisa, Leslie, and Diana Taurasi, something else was happening behind the scenes. A tension was building, not between Clark and her teammates, not between Clark and the coaches, between Clark and the structure around her. See, when you become the face of a franchise overnight, everyone wants a piece of the story. The media wants access. Sponsors want appearances. The league office wants Clark front and center at every promotional moment humanly possible. And the Fever, still figuring out how to operate as a suddenly relevant organization, were scrambling to manage all of it. There were scheduling decisions that raised eyebrows. There were marketing choices that some insiders felt prioritized the brand of Caitlin Clark over the health of Caitlin Clark. There were road trip logistics, practice loads, media obligations stacking up on top of each other in ways that would have tested any veteran player, let alone a 22-year-old in her first professional season. Clark never complained publicly. That's what made the whispers even louder. Because in professional sports, when a franchise cornerstone stays silent about something that's clearly bothering people around her, that silence becomes its own headline. Beat reporters started asking pointed questions. Former players went on podcasts and raised concerns. And the WNBA fan base, which had grown exponentially because of Clark, started demanding answers from the front office. What exactly is Indiana doing to protect their investment? What exactly is Indiana doing to keep Caitlin Clark happy enough to stay when her contract is up? And most importantly, does Kelly Krauskopf understand what she actually has? That last question cut the deepest, because in October 2024, a clip resurfaced of Krauskopf speaking at an event. And in that clip, she made a comparison that stopped Clark's fan base cold. She compared the Indiana Fever to Apple. Now on the surface, that sounds like a compliment. A visionary CEO talking about building a world-class brand, premium product, loyal customers, aspirational identity. But Clark supporters heard something different. They heard an executive talking about the company, not the player. They heard someone centering the franchise in a story that was entirely, undeniably built by one human being who chose to give Indiana everything she had from the moment she walked through those doors. The comment went viral overnight, and Krauskopf's social media went silent immediately after. No response, no clarification. No, what I meant was just nothing. That silence told a story, and it sent the fan base into full eruption mode. Forums, comment sections, Twitter, Reddit. Every corner of WNBA's social media lit up at once. Clark supporters were furious. They felt like the Fever were treating their star like a product feature rather than the architect of the entire revival. Others pushed back, said Krauskopf was being unfairly attacked for one comment taken out of context, said the front office had actually done right by Clark in ways that weren't visible from the outside. But here's the thing about fan anger in the social media era. It doesn't wait for context. It moves fast and loud. And the pressure landed squarely on Krauskopf's desk. She had a franchise transformed beyond anyone's projections. She had a player who, in one season, had done more for the Indiana Fever's financial health, national relevance, and long-term viability than the previous 8 years combined. And she had a fan base that was now watching her every move with a microscope. So she made the call, the decision that nobody saw coming, the one that, depending on who you ask, either proves Indiana finally understands what they have, or reveals exactly how out of touch they really are. Here's what happened. Krauskopf didn't call a press conference. She didn't leak it to ESPN. She didn't post a slick graphic on the Fever's Instagram. She went directly to the people who mattered most, the players, behind closed doors. Before the 2025 season ramped up, Krauskopf gathered the core of the Fever roster and made a commitment, specific, detailed, and unprecedented for this franchise. New investments in player infrastructure, travel upgrades, practice facility enhancements, a restructured support staff built explicitly around player health and recovery, and a direct acknowledgement, on record, to the players themselves, that the organization had not always gotten the balance right between commercial obligations and athlete well-being. For a lot of organizations, that would be enough. Admit the problem, promise to fix, move on. But Krauskopf didn't stop there, because she knew, everyone in that building knew, that the real question wasn't about travel schedules or practice facilities. The real question was about Caitlin Clark's future in Indiana beyond her rookie deal. And on that question, Krauskopf said something that nobody in the Fever front office had been willing to say out loud before. She said retaining Clark was the single highest organizational priority. Not a priority. The priority. Above roster construction. Above coaching decisions. Above expansion planning. Above everything. The entire franchise would be structured around making Indiana the place Caitlin Clark chooses to stay. And that's when the league took notice. Because this wasn't just an Indiana story anymore. When the president of the Fever went on record, even in a closed-door setting that immediately leaked, as closed-door settings always do, saying that one player's happiness and long-term commitment was a North Star of the entire organization, she sent a signal that echoed across every locker room in the WNBA. This is what it looks like when a franchise finally gets it. This is what it looks like when an organization stops treating its star like a marketing asset and starts treating her like the foundation of the entire building. But here's what nobody is talking about yet. Here's the part that changes everything. Because Krauskopf's decision didn't just affect Clark. It created a problem. A serious, complicated, fascinating problem that is now sitting in the middle of the Fever locker room like a live grenade. Every great decision has a shadow side. And Krauskopf's commitment to building the entire franchise around Caitlin Clark, as bold and necessary as it was, just created a fault line inside the Indiana Fever that nobody in the front office fully anticipated. Because when you publicly declare one player as the priority above everything else, every other player in that locker room hears it too. And some of them have something to say about it. Let's talk about what a WNBA locker room actually is. It's not like the NBA. It's not like the NFL. These are women who in many cases have played together internationally, competed against each other in college, traveled the world representing USA basketball, and built relationships across a decade of shared sacrifice. The WNBA is a small league, 24 teams worth of players. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody has history with everybody, which means when something shifts inside one franchise, the ripple moves fast. And what shifted inside Indiana after Krauskopf's declaration was the unspoken but unmistakable reordering of the locker room hierarchy. Not on the court, in the building. Now to be clear, Caitlin Clark has never asked for special treatment. Every teammate who has spoken publicly about her has said the same thing. She works harder than anyone. She defers to veterans. She lifts the players around her. She is not the problem. But Clark doesn't have to ask for anything. The organization's priorities speak for themselves. And when your franchise president goes on record saying one name is a North Star of every future decision, free agency targets, coaching hires, facility investments, scheduling negotiations, the players who aren't that name start doing math. Quiet math, personal math, the kind of math that eventually shows up in free agency decisions. Here's where it gets genuinely complicated. The Indiana Fever's other young core pieces, the players who were supposed to grow alongside Clark and build something together over multiple seasons, are entering a moment where their own futures are very much undecided. And some of them are starting to get looks from other franchises. Serious looks. Because the Las Vegas Aces, even after the seismic shifts following their back-to-back championships, even after roster turnover and the league-wide recalibration that followed, are still operating like an organization that knows exactly how to build around elite talent. Aya Wilson isn't going anywhere. And Aya Wilson, the most dominant power forward in the history of this league, makes every player around her better just by existing on the same court. If you're a Fever role player watching Indiana restructure itself entirely around Clark's preferences and priorities, and the aces come calling, that conversation gets interesting very quickly. And then there's the Angel Reese dimension. Because no conversation about the WNBA in 2025 is complete without acknowledging the other generational talent that entered this league in the same draft class as Clark. Reese and Clark. Clark and Reese. The rivalry that started in college, that LSU Iowa Final Four moment that broke the internet and pulled 12.3 million viewers, didn't disappear when they turned professional. It evolved. It became something more nuanced, more layered, and frankly more interesting than a simple rivalry. Because Reese, playing for Chicago Sky, has been building her own empire, her own fan base, her own cultural moment. And the contrast between how Indiana built around Clark versus how Chicago has navigated Reese's emergence tells you almost everything about the two different philosophies of franchise building in today's WNBA. Indiana went all in on one player and restructured the entire organization around her. Chicago has been more cautious, more committee-driven, more resistant to the idea that one player should be the gravitational center of every decision. One approach carries enormous upside and enormous risk. The other is safer and slower. And the league is watching both experiments play out in real time. Because whoever gets this right, whoever figures out how to maximize a generational talent while keeping a healthy locker room culture intact, is going to find how WNBA franchises operate for the next 15 years. But here's what makes Krauskopf's decision genuinely stunning when you zoom all the way out. She didn't just make a basketball decision. She made a statement about women's professional sports. For decades, literally decades, the argument against investing heavily in women's sports was built on a simple, circular logic. We can't pay players more until the league makes more money, and the league can't make more money until we invest more in the product. Round and round it went, year after year. Empty arenas and invisible marketing, and players working second jobs in the offseason just to make ends meet. Caitlin Clark broke that cycle by force of personality and talent alone. And now, for the first time in WNBA history, a franchise president is standing up and saying, we will build everything around keeping that force here. Not because the CBA requires it, not because an agent demanded it, because it is simply the right way to run a winning organization. That is what shocked the league, not the specifics of the decision, the posture of it, the willingness to say out loud to the players on the record that the old way of doing things wasn't good enough, that the women in that locker room deserve better, that the franchise owed Clark, owed all of them, a level of organizational commitment that matched the level of commitment they showed every single night on the court. Diana Taurasi played 19 seasons in the WNBA. She spent years navigating a league that undervalued its own product. She said in an interview once that she hoped the next generation of players would never have to fight the same fights she fought just to be taken seriously. Krauskopf's decision is a small but real step in that direction. And Taurasi, who has seen everything this league has been through, deserves to see it happen. So where does this leave us? Indiana has drawn their line. Clark is a priority. The organization will be built in her image for the foreseeable future. The fan base is watching to see if the commitment is real, or if it evaporates the first time a difficult roster decision has to be made. The rest of the league is recalibrating. Franchises that were complacent about retaining their own stars are suddenly having very different internal conversations. And Caitlin Clark, who has said nothing publicly about any of this, who continues to show up and work and perform at an otherworldly level, holds all the cards. She always has. Here's the final thought I'll leave you with. The Indiana Fever were relevant for almost a decade. They were a franchise operating on fumes, playing in front of empty seats, invisible to the national sports conversation. One player changed all of that. And now the woman running that franchise has stood up in front of her entire organization and said, we know what we have. We know what it's worth. And we are not going to be the front office that let it slip away because we were too slow, too cautious, or too focused on a brand to take care of the human being holding it all together. That's not just a WNBA story. That's a story about what happens when an organization finally wakes up. The only question left, and it's a question every Fever fan is going to be living with until Clark's contract situation is fully resolved, is whether the wake-up came early enough, or whether the damage from those early stumbles already planted a seed of doubt that no amount of facility upgrades and closed-door commitments can fully uproot. If you made it this far, you already know more about what's really happening inside the Indiana Fever than most sports media will tell you. Drop a comment below. Do you think Krauskopf's decision saves Clark's future in Indiana, or is it too little too late? And if you want the next chapter of this story the moment it breaks, you know what to do.